Live, I hope so. That would be ideal. Being live at the time I'm supposed to be streaming. There we go. Hi everyone, happy Friday. What is going on? It's the first Friday stream we've had in a good long while. Here we are. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day today. I'm just trying to get some stuff situated. Let me know if you can hear me. If you can't hear me, any combination therein. I love the I have my Slime Rancher shirt on. Oh my gosh, has Slime Rancher 2 come out yet? Wait. There's so many video games I need to play that I am not doing. Oh, okay, it's not coming out until next year. Okay, well, Slime Rancher is I'm not gonna say it's my perfect game, but Endless Ocean, Slime Rancher, Harvest Moon, basically video games where you can't die. I like casual farming games. I'm out here pretending like I live this progressive alternative lifestyle, but really on the inside, in my video game heart, I'm just a trad wife. a trad wife that loves farming. Reminder to have water, always good to be hydrated. All right, let's see. All right. Hello, Gabarazzi. Ooh, that's like paparazzi and Gabby put together. Hello, NorCal Gal. Hello, Massa Mouse. Hello, Lyric the Pup. Hello, Miss Shell. Hello. Leon is Leanne? Is that? I'm not sure where the words end begin in that one. Hello, Aged and Green. Hello, James. Hello, Phil. Hello, Brittany. Ooh, you're making dinner? That sounds tasty. I have plans for dinner, but I don't know. I'm between vegetarian or vegan pizza. Obviously vegan, because vegetarian would be cheese. And even if I ate it, I think my stomach would not be happy about that. Or vegan sushi. I have really in the last 6 months gotten into sushi. And I'm saying this and I feel like it sounds snobby, but when I was in college, I had a roommate that really enjoyed it, and they introduced it to me, and I went probably 2 or 3 times, and I was oh, okay, this is fine, because this is before I was vegetarian. This is before I was vegan. I think I was vegetarian, so I would get the cucumber rolls and things. And now that I'm in a much bigger city and there's so many options, even if you're not vegan, if you like sushi, get a tempura veggie roll. It's literally tempura in a sushi roll. So good. I'm also kind of addicted to wasabi. I really like wasabi actually, which I realized it's a different kind of spice. I also really like pickled ginger too. So maybe it's mostly that. I mean, I really treat avocado rolls and cucumber rolls as just vehicles for me to have wasabi. It's a very different spice though, because it's mostly in your nose, and for some reason I prefer that over chili spice. I don't know what that says about me, but have that information in case you wanted to know about my sushi preferences. Hey, haven't been able to make it to a Friday stream in a while. What with my mental health being so bad, I'm so happy to finally be well enough to catch it. Well, thank you so much, Ace, for joining us. You haven't missed anything. I actually haven't been able to stream on YouTube in 2 weeks. So if you meant last week or the week before, we weren't streaming anyways. So I hope that you were able to take some time to take care of your mental health, because that is very important. So today is just a general Q&A, hang out, have fun. I know we streamed earlier in the week on Tuesday. So this is we're having 2 streams in 1 week, which is really exciting. And we're just going to hang out. We're going to ask questions, answer questions. And I just, rules down below, check them out. If something happens against the rules, we'll talk about it, or we won't because we'll skip over it, I guess. But yeah, just have fun, hang out. I am going to be doing my nails at some point. I'm not doing anything exciting. I have this like nail treatment that I use that I got on Amazon. As you can see, my nails. It's weird because like my pointer finger on one hand, the nail's like so much longer than the other because I'm left-handed, so like this nail gets worn out really quickly for some reason. I don't know. So anyways, I'm gonna do my nails maybe at some point. I feel like that's not entertaining, but I feel like that adds to the air of just having a fun time together, you know? Speaking of mental health, though, I posted this on Twitter. I don't know if anyone else watches this YouTuber named Dr. K. Actually, Brittany, if you're listening right now, I can send you some of his videos. I really enjoy listening to Dr. K. He actually has an interview he did with Abba of Abba and Preach. Maybe that one would interest you in particular because I know you like react a lot and talk about a. I just lost my thought. Oh, you like react and talked about Abba and Preach a lot. So if you wanted to check that out, I think Dr. K is a really interesting story. I like that he's someone that talks a lot about the health and the mental health of being an online person as your job and being a streamer and video games. Like, I think all that is really important and is clearly underserved. He just put out a video called Is BDSM Healthy? It came out earlier today and I watched it and I was real nervous about that one. I was really, really nervous about that because like, when it comes to anything involving clinicians and BDSM, like, because of how long a history it has of being pathologized, it really depends on kind of who their mentors are and what their research area is and in terms of how friendly they are to BDSM. And it came up because somebody on the subreddit that I don't think he runs it, but I think it's like for his community. Like somebody asked, is BDSM healthy? Which is the eternal question, right? And he reacted to that and talked about it and broke it down. And I would love to have a conversation with him about this because he referenced a lot like, oh, we don't really have studies for this, or I wish we had studies for this. And I think I have a lot more additional research and context. And I know people that are either anthropologists or psychologists that are either doing master's thesi, or PhD programs where they are looking at segments of the BDSM community where I think that might be some information he hasn't seen before just because it's like not his field. He's not necessarily going to know where to look, and it's not always strictly going to be like in psychology as a field. There's a lot of like, comparatively, there's more like sociology, anthropology, like queer theory stuff related to BDSM than there is just like randomized controlled trials applying BDSM as mental health benefits or not. So I would really like to talk to him at some point. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but that would be like my dream is like, I respect him and he talks a lot about dharma. He talks a lot about like this concept of like finding your path or like calling in life. And I think that's a very useful idea. I don't know if you're into like psychology stuff or mental health. He talks a little bit about Ayurveda. So if you're not into Eastern medicine or like I don't know what the term for it is. It's like not, I guess, alternative medicine because it's not like naturopathy or anything. He's like, he only goes off of what he believes is like clinically like has scientific data behind it, but it's still like it's worth listening to. He has a lot of interviews with a lot of different streamers, internet people, and I think he's actually a really good example of an alternative look at what it can mean to be like successful and masculine at the same time, if that makes sense. Like as like I remember there was a moment I was just listening to it yesterday. I think it was a interview he did that just came out, and like he cries like on stream with one of the people he's interviewing, and I'm like, outside of an apology video, have I ever seen an adult man cry on YouTube? How often do you see adult men cry at all? Like if it's not an apology video or like a war movie where their buddy gets shot at the end of the movie, like it just doesn't happen. And so I think it's really positive to see someone like this very like objectively successful, objectively very like smart person. Like he has a lot of success. He did come from a place where he wasn't as successful and he was struggling a lot. And to see somebody like that kind of also show that it's okay to like cry and express emotion. Like even just that one moment of the stream where he was like, I'm going to take a second to cry with you was like so powerful. And I'm like, we need to see more of this. I like it. So anyways, the point is that he has a video he did recently talking about BDSM. Literally came out a couple hours ago. I think it's actually pretty good and worth listening to. I know he doesn't know anything about BDSM, and this is why. So I don't know how to even recreate this. It's like when you listen to someone talk about anime and they pronounce certain anime names like slightly differently than an anime person would pronounce it. Like I don't know, like if your grandma was gonna say, "Are you watching the Naruto?" Like as opposed to Naruto, it's like the emphasis is in the wrong place, you know? But instead, he says it the same way actually that Ashley Smithline says it, which is like, BDSM. Like he has to like think about each individual part of the acronym instead of BDSM. Like I feel like when you say it a lot and it's like part of your lexicon and it's part of something you talk about a lot, like you say BDSM, like it's just one word, and he has to BDSM. Like it's like a very like choppy word. Okay, yeah, he doesn't really, not really his area, which is fine. I just noticed that it's something that people that aren't familiar with the word, I think, tend to say it that way, which is, I don't know, just a funny observation I made. But it's nice to see that there's someone that is in the mental health field that, you know, is Harvard trained, has a pretty big platform, like talking about BDSM in a positive way. Because, like, oh my God, the way that kink is normally talked about by streamers is like, I have this nail file, so I'm gonna articulate with this, but streamers in July, June, sometimes May, the dialogue will start up where we get into the kink at Pride discourse. And unless it's kink at Pride discourse or Blair White reacting to something or a viral video everyone suddenly feels entitled to react to, like that's all of the attention BDSM gets from streamers. And it tends to not be very positive. It tends to be like, oh, look at those freaks over there, let's react to this video. Or it's in the vein of like exposing children to kink at Pride is bad, actually, and we're gonna call everyone that dares to be associated with kink, everyone that does BDSM's pedophile. That's the whole story. And it's like, that is not a very nuanced take, is it? So it was just nice to see somebody that's like a streamer that has a big audience. And I know that a lot of people, especially the sort of people that I think would be gravitating towards his channel, would be in a place when they're still working through being okay with kink, and they're feeling shame, and they're not sure if it's okay or not. They're not sure if their desires are healthy. And I think hearing from like an actual top tier mental health professional that it's, I think the phrase he used is, it's like a natural variant in human expression. Like it's something that is not necessarily bad or makes you evil, and I think that's really, really important. So I really was really happy to see that. I think it's a good video. Like, is it perfect? No, but it's not his area. He's just trying to help somebody out that had a really honest question, and I think compared to a lot of clinicians, he did a much better job than a lot of people that work in the mental health field do, sadly enough. So, okay, that being said, let's get into some questions. What do you got going on, guys? I want to know about your local scene reopening. What's going on with that? It's not. As far as I know, we have a statewide mask mandate, like for indoor things here. And there was one event that I was going to go to like 2 weeks ago, and I even bought tickets for it. And then I decided at the last minute that I was like, oh, I don't actually really want to go to this, because I had been like waffling about going to it for a while. Maybe it was longer than 2 weeks ago. It was sometime, actually must have been the beginning of August. Time flies. Okay. And there was an event I was thinking about going to, and then I decided not to, and that was like the only event that was really on my radar. By the way, I'm doing my nails right now. And after that, like, there's not really any in-person munches. There was one that was hosted again a couple weeks ago in August, and I didn't go to that because it was supposed to be outdoors at like a small park, and then 95 people RSVP'd, and I was like, yeah, either we're gonna be in the world's biggest circle, or like, that's too many people. Like, I haven't been around more than 4 people at a time in like 2 years. Like, I'm introverted. I need to calibrate myself to be around that many people again. 90 people, that's too many. I gotta do 10, 20. Like, that's the comfort zone I'm in. Just ignoring COVID, ignoring anything related to that, just like a sheer being around that many people, unless we were gonna break into smaller groups of like 10 to 20. 90 people's too many. I'm sorry. 90 people in a stream is great. 200 people in a stream is great. Not crammed into a park together. Sorry, I'm gonna give that one a pass. But other than that, not really a ton on the radar. Nothing I can really kind of talk about on YouTube. It's just been slow and dead, and it's something I'm like honestly not really that invested in. Like, I've just sort of, I don't want to say I've given up on it because I think it'll come back, but like, I just, if something happens, it'll happen. But otherwise, I'm just like happy taking online classes and doing my own thing. And, you know, every once in a while I get in a mood where I'm like really missing stuff, and I really, really miss being able to go to events. Like, I think the problem is I get too much hope about being able to do things again. And I see events and I see stuff that I could go to, and then either it gets canceled or it turns out they're not checking if people are vaccinated or not, and it's indoors and they're not going to enforce a mask thing, and it's like, I just don't want to. Oh, there was an event I was going to go to, and then I found out that one of the people as an educator at the event has like 5 people that have accused him of sexual assault, like actual full-on like RAPE. I was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to go to that event. Sorry. I don't even want to like be around that energy. Not going to do that. So, yeah, I try not to go. I guess I'm really consciously trying to like only go to events and go to places that align with my values, even if it means that I go to less things. And for me, a really important part of that is like not going to events and spaces that platform people that have known consent allegations against them, because you know, I think there's arguments that we can have and discussions we can have over what is the appropriate thing to do when people get kicked out of our community or have consent issues, especially multiple ongoing ones. I don't think that conversation starts with hiding the information and then keeping that person on their pedestal and maintaining their platform exactly as it was and allowing them access to basically more people of the same demographic that they were hurting before. So that means I go to less stuff than maybe I would want to, and that sucks, but it is important to me, and I have enough experience in kink, and I've done kink for long enough to where I'm not like, I desperately need to go to a party, and if I don't, I'll never have the experience. So I feel like I'm kind of privileged in that regard. But anyways, that's the update. I know I talked to some people that live like farther south, people in Georgia, Colorado, Arizona, and I know that they've been able to go to events for a while, and I just like have not gone to any. Well, actually, I shouldn't say any. I did go to a rope bondage class, but that wasn't even at a venue. That was like a private event that had like 6 people. Like, it was not the same as going to a dungeon, which is worth it. I really enjoyed it, but that's literally the only thing I've done since pre-COVID. Alrighty. First stream in a year. Welcome back, Eric. Tempura veggie rolls with massive wasabi rolls. Agreed. I've gotten stuff to make homemade sushi, but I haven't actually made it yet, and I have struggled to make sushi rice. I feel like there's something wrong with me. I can't make sushi rice, but that's on my like to-do list of baking, cooking things I want to try is to make homemade sushi because I have not done that before, but it sounds like fun. I think I just answered the question, but what did I think on Dr. K's video on his BDSM Healthy? I I watched it kind of thinking I might do a YouTube response to it, but I don't think there's anything in there for me to like respond to. Like it's just studies and information, I guess. So yeah, I don't really have any really deep thoughts about it. I just think it's interesting that he covered it, and I am happy that he did. And I think he did a pretty responsible. I think he did a pretty responsible job about it, as much as he could, not being a dedicated expert to it in the field. Ooh, going to a flogger making class next weekend and a flogging lesson afterwards. That's exciting. Flogging making class. I know people do like DIY classes. I haven't been to one though. Like I know about them, but I know people teach like how to make nylon whips, how to make floggers, how I don't think people do woodworking generally because that's a little bit more advanced, but I have definitely seen a lot of DIY classes. Like I've heard about them. I haven't been to one though, but it sounds like fun. Oh no, please don't let me be your only don't ever have me be your only source for BDSM stuff. I try really hard to make sure that people have other options for other voices and perspectives because I'm definitely not, the only expert. I just try to synthesize what I know with education I've gotten from others and books and studies and everything else. And I'm happy that people listen to me, but it's definitely worth getting other people's opinions too because I'm definitely not the be all end all. And I try to make sure that people know that it's not just my way or the highway. Like, there is definitely room for interpretation and subjectivity, as with all things. But I'm happy that you enjoy my videos. I just hope you understand you don't have to have me be your only source. Could you talk about your experience with primal play and what primal means to you? It seems very different from person to person. That's like too personal. I don't want to get into it. I appreciate the question. If you want to know about it, I do have a video on Predator and Prey, which is like very much like Primal if you want to watch that. And I talked about that one because that's like the most concrete way of explaining Primal. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like it does vary a lot person to person, which is why I don't have a BDSM 101 video on it, which is why I probably won't for the foreseeable future. It's because it's so individual. It's so hard to pin down that I can't even begin to like define the terminology to let you know what is something and what is not something and how it's different from other things. Like it just, there's not enough clear, universally understood community understanding of what it is compared to rough body play, compared to animal role play, compared to CNC, compared to predator and prey. Like there's so many overlaps and so many things that are so similar. Like it's just, again, it's really, really hard to pin down. But, I think for anyone that's listening to this, and I'm not going to take any further questions on Primal Play, but I will say if you want to know about it, this is true for most BDSM things, but in particular with Primal Play. The only way you will ever really know how it feels to you is to try it for yourself. You can get a sense, and the more things that you try, the easier it will be to guess how you will react to similar things. But especially with something that is so intimate, personal, and individual, like Primal Play tends to be, the only way you're ever really going to know, like, what is it like to do this thing? How do you do it? It's like, I mean, it's based off of instinct, right? So, like, whatever your instinct is going to lead you in that direction, as well as, like, the boundaries and consent and stuff you've talked about with your partner. I do have an interview with Rain de Grey that you can look up where I did talk about Primal Play with her. It's at the very end of the episode. Go to my interview playlist or look up Rain de Grey or Primal on my channel. You can watch that. We talk about Primal Play in there, actually, now that I think about it. But outside of that, I'm not really paying to talk about it. It's just very individual, and you're really only going to ever know like what it feels like or how it is when you actually try it, because everyone goes through things differently. Like I know people where it's their first time doing kink and they try bondage and spanking and a bunch of stuff, and they just like, they're like, yeah, I'm not really into this. They're not into the spanking, they're not into the flogging, but they love bondage, or vice versa. And maybe they cannot understand how the other person likes the other thing, and that's why we have to like try things out on our own if we can. Are success and intelligence always connected? I definitely don't think they are. When I say that Dr. K is like intelligent and successful, I don't mean to say that one has caused the other or is necessarily connected to the other. I mean, it's like, you know what's funny is what popped in my head is when you said is success and intelligence always connected, is like, just thought of Jake Paul. Like, I think he's smart, but in like an unconventional way. Like, he's... How do I explain this? Like, I think he is smart and like he has business acumen. Like, I think he understands his market. I think he understands like business strategy, and that has helped him maintain a career for a long time. I don't think he's like, if you put him pen to paper or had him read like a classic novel, like I don't think he would necessarily pass those measures, but he has a particular kind of intelligence. And that's why like talking about intelligence is so complicated, is because intelligence, it's not like some kind of singular thing, a single gene, like here's the smart gene, turn it on, turn it off. Like, it's very complicated. It comes in so many different forms. Like a professional football player, especially again at the pro level, playing at the top of the sport, like they are at a fundamental level, they have to be kinesthetically intelligent. They have to be very body aware in the same way, an elite level gymnast has to be, in the same way any sort of Olympian has to be, right? Like, there is a certain level of intelligence there that maybe doesn't map onto business acumen or philosophy or mathematics. Like, there's so many different types of and ways that you can be smart, and you can be successful as well doing all of those things, but you can also sort of just fail upward too. Like, you can just like not be engaged, not try, and if you get lucky, you have the right connections, the right family, you're doing something at the right time, the right place, you can be successful regardless of how your own abilities may enhance or hamper that. The group discussion Dr. K had in why did I read that sentence that way? The group discussion K had on masculinity was a good one too. I have not seen the group discussion. I'll have to check it out. I definitely don't talk about like feminism and like masculinity and things on my channel, but I feel like when we get into talking about dominance and submission and relationship roles and expectations, I think there are always going to be conversations about those things that are connected. Like, I don't think you can have a conversation about like the stereotypes around being a submissive man without having a conversation about masculinity. Like, I think those two things are intertwined, and I think actually the person that talked to Dr. K or wrote the Reddit post that Dr. K responded to was a submissive man, and that he had a lot of shame over being submissive. And I definitely think that masculine stereotypes are connected to that. So I think there's conversations, and BDSM and poly and things will always be my main focus, but I also I don't want people to suffer. I don't want people to not be able to live their happiest lives because they feel constrained by some kind of outward template they feel like they have to fit into. And I feel like masculinity is one of those things where it is very restrictive. And for example, if you're a submissive man and you feel like that doesn't fit in the template of masculinity in the way that it's been prescribed to you, like, that's really hard to deal with. So I think the conversation does intersect. Yeah, exactly. The Naruto. Why do people pronounce it like that? I have so many questions. Okay, question from Ash. I'm having an identity crisis right now. I used to think that I was little and that power exchange was something I was drawn to, but I haven't been as attracted to the idea lately. It's hard because I thought that I knew who I was as a kinkster, but now I have no idea. Any advice? So Locane said as well, you didn't ask me, but I will say that people grow and change, and that's natural and normal. It's okay to not be into the same things that you were into previously. And I think that's pretty much what it is. I know that people can kind of treat kink identities like, I found the thing that I am, and it's going to be who I am and what I am for forever. as opposed to individual things that they can do that make them feel happy and feel fulfilled. And whether that be being a little or a pet, I think you have to remember that even if that thing is very true to you and it is like a genuine, durable part of your personality, because if it is like a personality trait, right, that's like a durable characteristic that exists over a long period of time. And one, it doesn't have to be. Like, your kink interest can just be like whatever is in the moment and change a lot. That's totally normal. A lot of people have sort of a zest for variation. They have a zest for wanting to try as many things as possible. And so for them, their kink identity is like they like experimenting. And so they might be a little sometimes, or a pet, or a switch, or a dom, or a sub, or a pain bottom, or whatever. Like, it just varies a lot, and they're not really attached to any one thing. They're just trying to go after what is that unique new experience they haven't kind of done for a while or at all. But if you are somebody that falls more into the camp of like having that be like a sense of durable identity, I feel like, I don't know if there's like a word for this. It's almost like you have new relationship energy, if you're familiar with poly terminology. So you have new relationship energy with your kink identity. Like, you find you have these sort of internal feelings that you have been dealing with, and now you have found this thing that explains what it means. You have found this community and this way of being, and, you know, especially when it's something like DDLG, or being a little like, there's a strong community there, there's kind of a dress code, there's things you can buy and things you can do, and that's all like really exciting. It's like a really, really big dopamine hit on your brain, like all this wonderful new stuff that makes you feel like you belong and you know who you are, and that promotes a lot of like security, which our brain really likes. So we really like holding on to that. However, what ends up happening is, once you kind of get settled into that and you know how it feels, that like initial dopamine rush of like all of this new exciting discovery kind of wears off, and it tapers down to like whatever the real baseline's going to be. This is very, again, it's like new relationship energy, where you have this big spike in good feelings because it's like a new person, exciting, new body, new feelings, new kisses, new first, like that's all really, really amazing. And then after you've been in that relationship for a while, it's not that you don't care about the person anymore, but it's that you're kind of going into whatever your baseline is. So it could be just that you're kind of coming down from that like initial high of like realizing this is the thing that I'm really, really drawn to, and now you're kind of going into that less exciting just baseline of existence. Or it could be that you're doing it and then your passions have changed. Maybe you've learned more, maybe you've tried it out, it didn't exactly seem like it would be in your head. That can totally happen as well. Like, it can either be, again, that like big bump and then dropping off, or it can be a big bump and then just straight down and be like, I'm actually not really into this as much as I thought I was. And that's totally acceptable and fine as well. And I think especially if you came into kink with like a specific identity around like power exchange and DDLG, as you get more experience, as you get exposed to more ideas, then that means you have more options for what you can do that make you happy and fulfilled. And the more other things you add in, that can kind of dilute the previous identity, if that makes sense. Because instead of being like, I am this one thing, now it's like, I am this one thing and 5 other things. Or I like this one thing, but I also like everything else. And that can kind of make it stand out less to you mentally as like, this is the thing that I am. And also, like, it could be novelty, right? Like, I think whether it be MS, TPE, any kind of power exchange, pet play, littles, fire play, bondage, whatever it is, there is going to be a time period, or there can be, where doing it for a while and getting into a routine, it can be kind of boring. It can lose its appeal. It can be something that you get complacent around. And that doesn't mean that you're not into it anymore. It just means you gotta like spice things up a little bit. And I really don't think this is something that is like a kink only thing, or is that uncommon. I think in kink this is common. I think outside of kink, why do a lot of people go to BDSM? To spice things up in the bedroom, right? How many times we heard that? Where it's you engage in kink because you're vanilla and you've been doing the vanilla sex thing with an intimate partner for a long time, and even though you still enjoy the sex, like, it's like if you're engaging in heterosexual sex and it stops being like super like something you're drawn to, that doesn't mean you're suddenly not heterosexual anymore. Like, if you just get bored of like the regular sex routine you have, it just means that you've been doing it a lot and it's gotten kind of stale. And people bring in BDSM to change that up and to make it less stale and to reinvigorate that spark, or whatever it is they say. I don't know. And I think the same thing can happen in kink with particular kink activities where it's like, okay, well, I thought I was a pet player. I thought I was really into pet play, but I've been doing it a lot and it's just like not as appealing anymore. Like, it's fine to take a break from things, even if it's something that you're really, really into that is like a part of who you are as a kinkster. It is okay to step back and try something different, or kind of let that thing rest for a bit while you try on a different thing, or just seeing how you feel about it. 'Cause I think that's a really good test, is like time away from stuff. What's the phrase? It's distance makes the heart grow fonder. And I think that can be true for kinky stuff too. If you take some time away from it and then you go back to it, I think your reaction to coming back to it can actually give you a lot of information about how drawn to it you really are, or if it was just like the first kink thing that really felt real to you that you connected with. So it could be that you spend some time away and then you come back to it and then you find out, oh, okay, I'm actually not really like super enthused about trying this again. And then like, okay, it sounds like maybe that's something that, I don't want to say grow out of, like it's a thing that you move past in your kink lifespan naturally, but like maybe you have moved on to something else as your primary identity, or you don't know what that is yet. That's totally okay. If you come back to it and you're like super excited about like, oh, I'm so excited I get to do this again, this is going to be really amazing and fun, then you know this is probably something that's more important to you and just you needed a break to keep it from getting stale. Does that make sense? But of course, if you want to maintain some kind of power exchange dynamic that whole time, even when you're, you know, trying to take a step back from certain flavors of dynamics, that's like a different problem of like how to sort of reset your relationship while still maintaining the structure that you want to keep around. And we can talk about that if people are interested. If you were to stream with Dr. K, what would you want to talk in the stream with him? I think I'd like to talk about sort of concepts around acceptance and identity, and definitely like healthy kink behaviors, asexuality, and kink. And I also have some studies that I think reference and get to a few of the points that he talked about in the video that he like didn't know if there was data for or not, and I think that would be interesting to go over. Oh yeah. So follow up to that last question we talked about. Someone said, you may like some aspects of an identity, but not what the title suggests. Like I had little in my name, but I only like bondage aspects of that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the more experience you get, your relationship with the thing can change, and you may find out that, how do I phrase this exactly? You may just discover that you like certain parts of the package, but not the whole package. And that's totally valid. That happens a lot. And I think, honestly, sometimes the more experienced people are in kink, you can tend to kind of grab onto different pieces of different identities. Like I know somebody in the leather community that is a leather girl and a little and a service submissive and a masochist. And I think there was one other, what else does she do? There was something else in there that she does on top of that. I can't remember what it is. Maybe it was just those four. It's been a while. But like all of those identities coexist and kind of just came in different bits and pieces. And they actually have like separate headspaces and different protocol and things they use to make sure that each one of those various identities has their own time to make sure that they are being fulfilled, which I think is a really great approach. No, weirdly enough, the only deaf mistress I'm aware of is, I think, in a Marilyn Manson video. I don't know any professional dominatrixes that are deaf, but there are definitely a lot of people in the kink community that are also deaf or hard of hearing. I've been to many kink events where they do have translators available. You can request them as an ADA accommodation. So we definitely have space in the community for deaf people, even if it's not maybe, always the friendliest place or easiest to sign or things like that. But they are definitely around for sure. I'm sure if you Googled, you could find somebody that was a deaf female dom. But also, like, the kink community isn't pro-doming, so I'm probably not the right person to ask if you're looking for a professional service from a deaf dominatrix. How you doing, Evie? I'm glad to catch you live. I'm doing pretty well. I have been definitely having a much better week than the week before. It has been jam-packed with experiences, let's say. There's been a lot going on, but I'm doing a lot better. I'm super glad to be on here and streaming with you guys. I do have my window open, by the way. I didn't mention that earlier. I have my window open. It's cooler outside, and my house is just like so much hotter than it is outside, and I hope keeping my window open will prevent my camera from overheating, which I should actually check, by the way. Check to see if it's giving me the little warning sign. Oh, we're good. Sweet. We love to see it. We love it when our camera doesn't overheat and get damaged. Okay, let me see here. Yes, I know you guys can hear me clipping my nails because I did it next to the microphone and I said I was going to clip my nails. Don't think very many people like that as ASMR, but I gave you guys a warning, so you were warned. Okay. I don't know how I'm gonna like paint one of my nails, I guess, and then there's sort of a long question that's up next in the question queue. Someone I know firmly believes that the kink community is full of people with mental issues, and you have to have something wrong with you if you're a part of it. Is there anything I can do short of bringing them to a munch to change their mind? I don't think bringing them to a munch would even change their mind. Like, it depends on where that belief comes from and how invested they are in keeping it. Like, do they have that opinion because they had experience with someone that did kinky stuff that had mental health issues? Were they, like, raised by a dominatrix that had a very poor sense of boundaries? Like, what's the backstory on that assumption, I do think if you do some simple Googling that they can even do themselves, there are several mainstream, easily available articles on places like Psychology Today, which provides you links to the studies that they have, where they talk about the prevalence of mental health issues and mental health outcomes. And this is one of the things I want to talk to Dr. K about, actually, is there are many studies that go over the mental health outcomes of people that are kinky, and the repeated consensus, at least for people that are self-identified as members of the BDSM community, is that kinky people, on average, are not any more likely to have adverse mental health outcomes or mental health issues compared to the rest of the population. So it's just a stereotype. We have studies that back this up. It's been well known for many, many years now. Also, the actual diagnostic manual that professionals use to diagnose issues makes a clear delineation between pathological disorder and consensual healthy adult behavior and what is a natural deviation in people's intimate expressions, shall we say. So there's plenty of evidence, if they will listen to authority, on the prevalence of mental illness and kink being a mental illness, which I think it's like two sides of the same coin. Like, there are people that think you have to be mentally ill to do BDSM, and also that any form of BDSM is a sign of pathology, which is objectively, in terms of the science, not true. There is one study I'm thinking of in particular that I don't remember the name of, but I remember the results of it quite clearly, which shows that for people that identify as, I think they did male submissives, female submissives, male bottoms, and, or, sorry, male tops and female tops. Although I think they used dominant and submissives for both in the paper. They looked at the mental health outcomes. I think they looked at the big 5 personality traits. It's been like probably 3 years since I looked at the study. I need to find it again. But if I remember correctly, basically, especially dominant people tend to have more positive mental health outcomes compared to control. When they identify as dominant, like they tend to be more confident, they tend to have less issues daily with mental health, tend to be less anxious, that kind of thing. The only thing that I remember that was potentially negative in there that was like this group seems to be worse off mentally than control is male submissives are slightly worse off than the average for the population than the control group. I think because of issues related to shame and guilt, which is again because it's in conflict with the standards for masculinity, having that shame because they are doing something that society tells them is outside of their gendered station makes sense. And that could easily be internalized shame in the same way that like a lot of trans people have shame, but being trans is not a mental illness. I feel like that shouldn't be controversial to say. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But like honestly, at the end of the day, if someone wants to be convinced that being kinky is a mental illness and bad for you and means you have psychological problems and were tortured as a child, like they're going to believe it no matter what you say because they're always going to move the goalpost to whatever is the next most defensible position, right? If you show them the data that kinky people on average are not any more mentally ill than the rest of the population, they're going to move on to, okay, well, just because the studies show that they're not any more than average, you know, the people who are really dangerous. Or you might say that actually on average, people that participate in BDSM tend to have better self-esteem and more confidence. Like, they're going to be like, okay, well, then they're like arrogant and egotistical, and that means they're all narcissists. Like, you know, it's like, it just, whatever it is, they're going to come up with a rebuttal to make sure they can believe and maintain whatever their first point is. So just keep that in mind. Like, if somebody wants to believe that kink is bad and is mentally unhealthy, like, unless they are openly willing to be like, I want to change my mind about this, they're probably not, because it tends, in my experience, tends to be a fairly deep-seated belief that people have that kink bad for you, because they're like, how in the world could, like, hitting someone be good? Like, you could even argue, like, okay, well, when you're doing BDSM, the goal is to do it for mutual pleasure, and if you're not doing it, that's when it's, like, pathology. And then they go, okay, well, it's not feminist to want to hit your girlfriend. Like, there will always be another argument that they will have, you know? So, womp womp womp. It's sad, but I just really would advise you to not necessarily spend mental health and energy points on somebody that maybe doesn't want to actually have their opinion changed, because it is exhausting and you can spend a lot of time doing that if you feel like it. Yeah, exactly, Ash. You can't force someone to see things your way. All you can do is try to educate them, but if they won't listen, you can't make them. Yep. You got it, dude. You got it. Oh, that's right. So Kitty Van Halen said you can have them read when someone you love is kinky. I have never personally read that book, so I can't tell you how persuasive it is or if it would be helpful in that scenario, but there is a book for that exact scenario if you would want to give that a go for some reason, if that made sense. I don't know what your relationship with this person is, if it's like a friend or a family member, your mom, like, you know best. You know best what would be good for that dynamic. Aw. I'm sorry to hear that, Masso Mouse. I hope you get to listen to this later. I know how it is. Take care of yourself. No need to apologize if you guys can't make it to a live stream. I totally understand. That is why I do them every week, is so if you're not able to go one week, you can come back next Friday and we're here again, and sometimes other days, though not as often. Sometimes we're here other days, but that's a special treat. That's only if everyone's good girls and good boys and good thems. Good, I don't know, what's the non-binary good boy? I need to know. That's an important term to have in my back pocket. Okay, interesting question. I'm gonna say Leon. If it's Leonis, it's either Leon is or because I don't know where. Anyways, I'm not gonna worry too much about it. We're gonna answer the question. So glad that you can stream again. A question: how do I know if I'm Aro? I don't really know what it means. I enjoy sex with my wife, but I really don't know what love is. I wonder if I'm just too selfish. Oh, my friend, this is a very. You have expressed something that a lot of Aro people say. Of course, standard disclaimer is I can never tell anyone what their identity is for them, be that ace, Aro, heterosexual, bi, pan, whatever it is. I cannot tell you as a stranger on the internet what it is you really are. I can help you with ideas and help you with introspective questions to ask to help you maybe find a stronger answer, because really at the end of the day, I think that labels should be something that make you feel at home in yourself and understand yourself better, so then the world can understand you better if that is something you want to do. But I feel like if you have a wife and you don't know what love is and that makes you feel selfish, that certainly sounds like a thing an Aro person would say. I know a lot of Aro people struggle with feeling selfish in their relationships because the stereotype we have in our culture is love and romance go together, and you are supposed to find one person to have the eternal, most strongest ever love, happy sex with, and if you don't do one or only do one, then that means you're a failure or it's not like true love or whatever. Obviously, that's not true, and relationships can look like any combination of things that make both people involved or any people involved feel comfortable and fulfilled and happy and are based in consent. There is actually a video that I did. I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe this is where this question is coming from. I do have a video that is just about. Let me see if I'll find the. I realize now that I think I have the links in the video still. Let me see. No, I got rid of them. Okay, I do a video about demisexuality, which is sort of related to this, but there's actually a video that a really big YouTuber named Anthony Padilla did. We watched this on a live stream for Patreon a couple weeks ago. I love Anthony Padilla's videos where they're called I Spent a Day with Blank, right? He spends a day with an adult baby. Fantastic. It's like the only non-cringe, non-kink way of looking at ABDLs that I've ever seen. Like, he did a really, really good job. He has one with furries, Therians, survivors of cult abuse, ex-Mormons, like whatever you can think of, he's spent a day with it. He's supposed to do one with dominatrixes soon, so look out for that one, hopefully, fingers crossed. But he has one where he spends a day talking to aromantics. Now, if I remember that video correctly, everyone that he talked to in that video are repulsed by romance. They're not just not romantic, they are actively like, I don't like this and I don't want to be around it, and I find the idea gross, which maybe isn't the specific flavor that makes sense to your brain, but I really recommend that video because you get the perspective of like 3 or 4 people that are all aromantic and how they found the label, what it means to them, what kind of relationships they have. I believe there's one person in there that's married, and I know at least one of them also like actively has like sexual partners. So they're not ace Aro, they're just Aro. And that would definitely be worth listening to. Now, as somebody that's not aromantic, it's hard for me to just like list off a bunch of things that are like, these are the traits of an aromantic, because I am a very romantic person. I am asexual, but that doesn't mean that I'm aromantic. That is what my relationships go towards, is the romantic portion of the relationship. That is what I really look for. So I would probably look at, I don't know, even, I just feel like watching the Anthony Padilla video would be very informative as like a good place to start. Let me think about this for a second. Taking a page out of the Dr. K book here. I would think about like think about things that you believe are romantic, and do you feel drawn towards any of those? Now, what is considered an act of romance or platonic friendship or a way to basically implement foreplay before sex? Like, there are mixed boundaries between all of those, but if you think about what sort of activities you would personally consider romantic, and do you feel drawn to them? Do they feel gross to you? Do you do them or not? And then your own internal feelings as well, which unfortunately, again, I'm not you, so I don't know what those feelings are. And if you don't feel compelled towards doing any of those things, or they feel kind of gross to you, I feel like that's probably a pretty strong indicator of being aromantic. And in terms of your wife, I guess I would think, I'm not, I think there's a stereotype that aromantic people don't have affection for other people. I think affection comes in a lot of forms that can also include platonic affection. So if you can kind of maybe think about your relationship with your wife in terms of like, do you consider it like you're like best friends with your wife? Like you're really, really close friends, but not necessarily like romantically different than maybe your other friendships. It's more of like a commitment or like sexual compatibility thing. Those are some of the things I would think about. But any aromantic people in the chat that would want to jump in here, I would love to know your thoughts. Oh my god, I'm literally only on like. Wait, okay, no. You need me to the beginning of the chat? Okay, I don't know how that happened. I was like, how am I only to the questions that are before the stream even started? That doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense because YouTube chat messed up, I guess. I don't know what I did. My bad. Somehow went all the way to the beginning. When will you be reading Erotica again? I don't know. I think a couple months ago I did a video reading Erotica. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, like those videos don't necessarily perform very well, and I've kind of gone through all of the really big recommended titles that are on all of the most popular bestsellers lists for BDSM books. Crossfire series, 50 Shades of Grey. Like I've read those ones, and so I don't know what would get someone to click on that video. So for like, the reason I do it is because I want to make a video that people will enjoy watching, and it's a lot of work to make those videos and then not have them do very well. So maybe in like 6 months, I'm sure I will again, but unless there's another big blockbuster that comes out that becomes the next 50 Shades of Grey, I'm not sure when the next one will be. I'm not giving it up entirely. I'm just, not sure when the next episode will happen. Oh my god, I blocked a guy on Twitter because I told him rape jokes weren't funny. Instead of saying no worries, he actually started harassing me and doubling down on it. It was bizarre. Sorry, Barney. Twitter is where people go to be big mad and troll everyone, and I would recommend engaging in it as little as possible, to be honest. Oh, it's not a fun time. That sucks, though. I mean, it just feels like they they saw an opportunity to like own someone and like make them mad, and they decided that was what they wanted to spend their time on today, I guess. Which is like, you couldn't think of anything better or more productive to do? This is the path we went on. Okay. All right, sure. Why not? What? I made some corrections to the Wikipedia page article on BDSM. Their stick up the ass editors reversed all of my corrections. It is so frustrating the amount of misinformation they're publishing. I don't even. What is even the process for editing something on Wikipedia? Like, did they tell you why they reversed the corrections? I'm assuming you had like citations and stuff, like, because that just seems ridiculous. That just sounds like somebody somewhere has decided they are the arbiter of truth and they don't like being told they're wrong, so instead they just reverse everything that could tell them they're wrong. Oh, jeez. Hello, Evie. What is your opinion on S-types choosing to skip through negotiation practices? Oh, skip through negotiation practices, sorry. And choosing opt-out negotiation for the first time they meet someone. That is an interesting proposition. I guess my opinion depends slightly on how experienced the S-type doing that is. I think if you're more experienced and you have really solid communication patterns, it's slightly less risky than if you're just brand new and doing it. People are allowed to take on whatever level of risk they want. Whether or not that's advisable for having a long-term positive experience is the part that I have to raise questions around. Personally, I would say if you're a brand new S-type and you're skipping those thorough negotiation practices, and then you're choosing, maybe I should define what opt-out communication is. So I have a video on this that's called opt-out versus like, let me see if I can find an article to link to you guys real quick. Opt-in versus opt-out negotiations. Because I realize now that I've said that I have had to delete the links in that video. So let me see here. Oh, does Morgan Thorne have a video on this? Okay, so I'm linking to Miss Morgan Thorne's page so you guys can look at that. But basically, opt-in negotiation means that only the activities discussed and agreed to are part of play, whereas opt-out is everything is fair game except for certain hard limits. And the problem with doing opt-out negotiation as a new person is you think of a lot of things that are obvious that you feel like you shouldn't have to say are hard limits because nobody does those, like dismemberment and scat play and being a baby. And you're like, oh, nobody does that shit. I don't even have to say that. It's so obvious no one would do that. It's too crazy. If you end up with an unethical top that's a little bit too much of like an actual clinical sadist, they can take advantage of that style to say, oh, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do this. And then suddenly you're being waterboarded in milk while wearing an adult baby outfit in the middle of a park. Because you didn't say no public play, you didn't say no ABDL, you didn't say no waterboarding with milk. And especially if a top that's like a bratty top, basically, where they're like, you didn't tell me I couldn't do this. They like really like to rules lawyer things. Sometimes it can just be to teach somebody a lesson, to be like, this is why opt-out negotiation is bad with strangers, just to kind of scare you a little bit. Like suddenly the hair clippers come out and like, oh, you want to be bald tonight? Cool, let's go for it. I've always wanted to cut somebody's hair off. You just end up getting put into really awkward scenarios, and I feel like the best scenes come from doing more negotiation. And I know that's like boring, and I know it ruins the moment or whatever. It definitely doesn't have to. It can totally be foreplay to negotiate for a kink scene. But people think that doing big negotiations ruins things and makes things boring and predictable, and they want to just get into it, right? They're like, if a real submissives, blah, 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 just real submissives don't do thorough negotiations because they can take whatever and they have very few hard limits. Like, it's almost like if I only opt out to a few things, that means I'm like a better sub and I'm harder and I'm less of a newbie, and so that makes me like more valuable. It doesn't, unless it's to a predator, in which case, put a big old target on your back. This is just like, it's a really complicated question though, because again, like, people are allowed to do whatever they want to, and just because they aren't doing it perfectly or just because they're taking on more risk doesn't mean they're like bad people. They're just making different choices. I just think they should be aware of the reasons why they're making their choices and kind of see if the reasons why follow logically. Like, if you're skipping a thorough negotiation practice simply because they take too much time and you get bored, like, is that like really a good reason versus like your literal life and safety potentially being at risk with a stranger? Like, does that track? For me, it doesn't. But if you are more experienced and you're not playing with somebody that you have just met that day, like, I think there is a place for opt-out negotiation styles. I think they're really good for mindfucks, any sort of mental BDSM, mental bondage, anything that involves kind of like trickery, basically, and that more mental emotional experience. Opt-out negotiations work really, really well for that, but there's a reason why those things don't normally happen with new people, and it's because it's very easy that those things can be taken advantage of and go wrong. I think in that scenario, if I came across somebody that said, hey, I'm new, but I don't really want to do opt-in negotiation, I really just want to kind of wing it, I want to not really do this whole checklist thing that doesn't really work for me, I would want to talk to them about like why it is that they are against doing stuff like that, and like what they're doing, and making sure what they're doing actually fits in with their risk profile. Like, I want to make sure what they're actually doing puts them in the position that they're okay with being in. It's almost like this informed consent, risk-aware kind of decision-making, where if you're doing opt-out because you don't know better and you don't realize how risky that is, then you're not really making an informed choice around choosing opt-out negotiation. And I think that's my problem with it, is like, are you making an informed choice when you are deciding these different negotiation styles? Because if you're just doing it because you think having less limits and less boundaries will make you more appealing, or you think that negotiations are boring and stupid, but you don't really think about the consequences, that's very different than somebody that has chosen to do opt-out negotiations because they have like a very specific approach to kink they want to do, where they want a very genuine level of fear and anticipation that's hard to get from a traditional negotiation practice, and they're aware that there's a lot of risk, and they're aware of the fact that like certain things can go wrong, or that they might forget to say something that is actually an important thing, that's a boundary for them. You know, I think there's just different approaches. And sorry, I like rambled about this, but I think it's a really interesting idea about like the sort of conflict between like best practices, especially because I talk a lot about best practices and what people actually do in reality, and making sure that people are doing things that line up with what their stated risk profiles are. And that's like my every dog is barking again. Oh my god. Pomeranian. All is forgiven. It was a Pomeranian. There was a big dog that got too close to a Pomeranian. It was a little red sable. It was so cute. Honey, there was a Pomeranian friend. She's out there. She's in the living room. Bandit's in the living room. Hi, honey. Hi, sweet girl. Hi. There was a Pomeranian friend. Oh my goodness. Yes. He was so fluffy. And he barked way louder than you've ever barked. He was like, leave me alone. Get away from me. There he is again. I just heard him again. You're very quiet and very sweet, aren't you? You would never do that. Unless it was at a squirrel. You'd bark at a squirrel like that, probably. Just the absolute loudest bark. Hi, honey. Do you want to snuggle? Oh, yes. We do want to snuggle. Girl. Yes. I took Bandit outside today for a very short walk because her leg is still healing, but she's doing a lot better. Oh, I meant to change the the stream donation goal. Bandit is signed up for a surgery consultation in October, so I guess we'll see then if surgery is still going to be necessary, but she is doing a lot better, so we went outside for just a really, really short walk around the block today. Nothing too intense because the weather was nice, so I knew the sidewalk wasn't going to be hot, so I wasn't worried about her, like, little paw pads getting overheated by the hot sidewalk, and she really liked it, and I kid you not, in that block radius walk, I ran into 3 people that all complimented how cute Bandit was. Like, somebody said, oh my gosh, your dog is so cute. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Oh my gosh, she has such a pretty coat. Like, I ran into a lady that told me about how she has an 8-year-old Pomeranian. Bandit is 9, by the way. I ran into a lady that has an 8-year-old Pomeranian named Peanut. Ideal Pomeranian name. And we talked for a little bit. She told me about how her mom used to breed Pomeranians, and that's how she got Peanut. And Bandit was just so sweet the whole time, and she met so many people that loved her so much. People are just obsessed with you, Bandit, which is why I don't leave you unattended. Because I'm afraid someone will steal you because you are too sweet and too pretty. A beautiful girl. Anyways, done talking to my dog. I couldn't tell how big the Pomeranian outside was, but he was very fluffy. Very, very fluffy. If I want to look into going to a party or something, how would I be able to look into the host background so I don't put myself in a bad spot? That is a great question, Mandy. So important. So if I was looking into the host background, this is why I recommend being part of a community space, because then you can kind of figure out who's who and figure out who's safe and who's not, because there are a lot of people that run their own events, and the reason why they run their own events is because they've been kicked out of somewhere else. And so they run events because that's like how they're able to stay in the kink world without just completely disappearing. But I would usually ask other people that I know in the local scene. And if you're not part of one, really good reason to do so. So you can ask the other event organizers, other attendees, like, hey, have you gone to this party before? What did you think about it? That kind of thing. That is the best thing you can do, honestly. But it can be really hard to find out. And, don't beat yourself up if you find out you've gone somewhere and it turns out that, maybe the person whose party you went to wasn't the greatest person. Now, if you're like worried about your personal safety going to an event like that because you're worried something might happen to you, go with a buddy. If you don't go with a buddy, go with a plan. Make sure someone knows where you are. Leave somebody with your information about where you're going to be going, your address, all of that good stuff, time you're supposed to be home. And I wouldn't go to a party that has like less than 10 people RSVP to it. Like, if I am going to an event and it's a new area for me or it's a person I haven't heard of before, I would only go if I have mutual friends going or other people I know in the scene, and only if it's more than like 10 or 12 people, which I know with COVID is a little bit like, well, social distancing is important, but you want to make sure you're not going to a random stranger's house where it's going to be you, 2 people, and a bowl of chips, right? So, I would definitely start out from a place of like wanting to look for things that are popular, well known, a lot of people go to them, and that's going to be a little bit easier. But it's very, very hard to tell, to be honest. There's no like one key way that's like, this is the way that you have to make sure that you're going to stay safe. It's like those combination of other factors. So even if something turns out to be ran by a less than good person, I guess, shall we say, you are still doing what you can to stay safe. And I've talked about that in videos. I have a video I put up a couple weeks ago now. It's called How to Stay Safe. If you haven't seen it yet, Mandy, I would highly recommend you watch it because there's a lot of information in there that will cover your question and more. But that's a very, very good thing to keep in mind. So I'm glad you asked. When I asked someone what being a dom meant to them, he literally told me that it was tying someone up and fucking them, people in their ignorance. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's not surprising, is it, Miss Banditi? We hear people say things like this all the time, yes. I mean, I am personally on dating websites, and I do read through profiles where people mention that they're kinky, and I get into conversations, and like 9 times out of 10, I find out it's somebody for whom sex and kink are synonymous, and they do BDSM sexually at home in private. And I'm like, yeah, we're not going to be compatible then. Sorry, moving on. It is the unfortunate truth, I suppose, that a lot of people, you know, and that's like the iceberg of kink, I think, is, I've talked about this before, but there are a lot of people, I would say even the majority of people, I'm going to move my microphone closer to my face here. So there are a lot of people that do kinky stuff, that do BDSM, but for most people that ever do it, it is a fantasy thing. It is a thing they do occasionally in the bedroom, or it is something that is purely sexual. And that would be the majority of people that engage in BDSM. To be part of a community, to have a culture based around it that you are a part of, is quite unusual. And it's important to keep that in mind, especially when we kind of like crap on people for liking 50 Shades of Grey and things like that, which is not really related to this, but you know, a lot of people that do kinky stuff engage in it in a very different way than like people that are part of the BDSM community do it. And it's not necessarily bad or worse, it's just different. And I think there is a difference between like being just kinky and being in the kink community. And it's that community aspect and like how much of a role it plays into your daily life, your lifestyle, all of that I think is the difference, or one of the differences, I think. Hi, baby girl. What are you doing? You are so snuggly. I love you so much. Go, baby. Sorry, I'm just gonna like, as long as Banna's on my lap, I'm gonna like talk to her because she's like a little potato that I just dug up from the ground, and now she's on my lap. She's my little perfect potato. My little baked potato. It's probably not very flattering to call my dog a baked potato, but if you could see how she looks right now, she's in perfect potato lump form. Not lumpy, just lump. I am very new, and I'm very new and part of a new munch. I suggested, based on YouTube info, optional name tags, but was told people have never seen it or want it, but tags serve a purpose. What is your take and experience? I have seen name tags at munches before, like the very stereotypical corporate, hello, my name is. I've seen those ones. I think more commonly I have seen name tags that are not really name tags, they're like pronoun pins with like a blank space to add in your name. And that tends to be more popular in certain circles, but it totally depends on the event. I personally like them, but it's something that's really going to vary from place to place and what the norm is there. But I like it because it is easier to put in your FetLife name. It's easier to remember people for later. If you're face blind and you only go off of names and like voice recognition, like having that information I think is helpful. So I like the name tag option. But also like you have to kind of make it clear that it's not like if you don't want to put your legal name, if you want to put your FetLife username, you have to like make sure people know how to use it to feel comfortable, because I think a lot of people would, I think reasonably, have the fear that like, okay, well I have this name tag, so like what do I put down? Is it weird if I put my FetLife username? Like, is this too personal? Is it going to be identifying later? Is it going to be, you know, like there can be kind of a privacy issue with it as well. You know, if you're like, I don't know. I guess I could see why people might be nervous about using one, is what I'm trying to say. Oh, thank you so much, Cuppy Cakes. You have helped me and my sir really find our groove and things we like and the right safe way to do them. Thank you. Well, I try my best. Thank you, Cuppy Cakes. Ooh, we have a Russian in the chat. Welcome. Thank you for the love from Russia. Can't stay for the rest of the stream. My boyfriend gets home from work soon. We call every day, but I did enjoy listening to this so much. Thank you so much, Ace Overlord. I hope you are doing well, and best of luck to you, and continued improvement in your mental health. Okay, another question here. Do you think you would ever do an educational video on polyamory? It's something that I've gone back and forth on a lot. I'm not... Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Glad to see you and hear from you again, Evie, especially after recent events that I hope are behind you. I hope so, too. I freaking hope so. Like, it's been a couple of weeks, and, you know, I'm in a better place. I have all my backups done. I've got everything I need. I've got, like, business plans out the wazoo. Been staying up until, like, 4 a.m. working on. It's been a process, but I think, you know, the worst has happened. Okay, let's see. What question was I answering? Do you ever do education for polyamory? Like I said, it's something that I go back and forth on. On the one hand, I feel like there are so many really good books on polyamory and open relationships that cover so many of the other natural topics that people would then want to ask as a follow-up, that I'm like, I could just redirect people to those places because like the books are legitimately good, and I feel like with BDSM there isn't as much of that. Like, there are definitely 101 books. There's a lot of them. We've talked about it, but they're not necessarily always complete, or they miss a lot of areas, or they focus on one style of BDSM, which I guess is kind of true with poly. Like, I think the dominant model that you see in a lot of books about polyamory is a very particular type of, I wouldn't call it non-hierarchical poly. I guess that's probably the best word. I was going to say anti-hierarchical poly, but they are kind of, I think they're more informed by being against hierarchy than they are by actually practically being non-hierarchical. So I will call them anti-hierarchical. That is the word I will use. So they do tend to be bent in one direction, I suppose. The book I do always recommend to people is called Opening Up. I believe that is by Tristan Tormino, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes, it is, who we really love on this channel. Highly recommend, really good book. And I like that one in particular because it is a survey of many different approaches to poly, which is something I think a lot of the books are missing. And I also believe Dr. Liz Powell has a book out as well that's called Building Open Relationships, similar premise, goes over a lot of different potential approaches, and that's what I enjoy. But I think I would at some point make a video talking about poly, and kind of approaching it from an educational direction. I certainly think that's another thing that I could do as a topic on my channel, but it's not something I feel very compelled to in the moment, but I certainly have it on like the back burner of like things I want to talk about eventually, because I think it, I like talking about being ace, I like talking about being into kink, and I think being kinky, poly, and asexual, all of that goes together, and more representation for more less known identities is always better. So I definitely will consider it, but it's sort of like, I know that when I do that, it's never going to just be one video. And that's like why I haven't done it yet is, I opened the Pandora's box of doing BDSM 101 videos, and here I am 6 years later still talking about it. Like, I know that once I open that conversation up, although I think it would be more like asexuality where, there's like, oh, are we done, honey? Are we done? Okay, so, yeah, I think it would be more like with asexuality. Here, let me just, there we go. Yeah, I think it would be more like with asexuality where I would definitely cover it like regularly, but it wouldn't be like 30 videos. It'd probably be more like 10 or 12. But again, like once you open that box of talking about polyamory, then it's like, okay, well, what about unicorn hunting? What about jealousy? What about breakups? What about BDSM and poly? What about kids? What about families? What about coming out? Like, there's so many subjects that go into poly. Like, how do you start out as like a single person in poly? How do you enter into a poly relationship that has an existing couple? Hierarchical versus non-hierarchical versus relationship anarchy. There's so many intersections. Like, what is it like to be ace and polyamorous? Like, there's so many. Maybe I should do a video about that. Maybe that would be like a good introduction. I'll put that on the idea list. That I feel like that's like a a good place to start that conversation. But anyways, I do like it. There's so many things I have ideas for and things I want to film before I add sort of like a third category types of videos to make. I want to work on some other stuff first, but I think I will. Because there's not really a lot out there. Like, there's a couple people that talk about poly, but it's not really a YouTube genre, I think. And if you guys know anyone that talks about polyamory as like their main channel focus and they have over like 20K subscribers, like definitely let me know, because I am very curious about the types of people that make poly videos and what it is they're covering exactly. So Jonathan, it may be okay. I don't know what you mean by this. So Jonathan asked, is it okay for me to bring up breathplay, like a hand around a woman's neck? I want to make sure it's okay for future partners. If you mean like safety advice on how to do breathplay and if it's safe or not, I don't talk about it. The actual answer that I'm going to tell you is that breathplay is never 100% safe. It is always dangerous, and by doing it, you are accepting a small risk of death, frankly. It is very risky. It's not something I'm going to tell you how to do on YouTube. It is a thing that people do. It can be a thing, but I do not give advice on how to do it because it is outside of my risk profile as an educator to talk about how to do it, because, again, it is like impossible to do completely safely. Like, the only way that you can do it completely safely is not actually breathplay, basically. Basically. Oh, thank you for hanging out, Brittany. Hope you enjoy your dinner. I don't know why I said it like that, but bye. Yeah, I feel like I'm finding ways of being in BDSM that gives me that security I need, those boundaries. I think I'm a brat, actually, and I really hope my new boyfriend can dom. That's great. If you've, like, figured out, like, what makes you feel good in BDSM and, like, where those boundaries are for you, that's, like, a really great place to start, especially if you do want to, like, introduce a potential partner or a new boyfriend to the concept as well. Like, you being in a good, secure place with that is definitely a lot easier than you still figuring out and like what you want and where your boundaries are, and then trying to also bring somebody along for that discovery process, you know? My neighbor is jackhammering the sidewalk and I can't hear anything. That sucks. I'm sorry. You know, I will see you hopefully later. Oh, good question, Flower Petal. And no worries about not having a dom. Feel free to always ask. Like, if you are on here and you're vanilla and you're not even kinky, you don't have a boyfriend, you're a virgin, like, it doesn't matter. Any kind of person can ask a question on here. No Nazis, but other than that, like, we're pretty cool. Like, don't worry about not being kinky and, like, or not having a boyfriend or a dom yet and, like, asking stuff. I think that's, like, a great opportunity, a great time, as actually, like, before you get into a relationship to ask questions. But anyways, what if a dom doesn't trust you or doesn't believe you, even if you are loyal to them and adore them? Like, I go to school or work. Okay. I'm just really frightened. Okay, I thought there might be a part 2 to that one, but that seems like it's like a complete thought. Well, that's so interesting, because I think when we think about trust, we usually think about trust where, like, the dominant has to trust the submissive to execute on things and to actually do what they promise and to follow the rules. But we don't always see that question, I think, in the other direction. Or, like, a submissive, well, I think we also, well, yeah, I think if we do get it, it's like, can I trust you to follow through on your promises in terms of, like, maintaining rules and structure, or trust in terms of a submissive trusting a dom to, like, not harm them, not violate their boundaries, things like that. I don't think I think that is. Don't know if that was necessary. Okay, truck. Thank you for your contribution to this conversation. But yeah, I don't think we really see it where it's that direction of, like, a dom not trusting you. I guess, oh God, there's like so much room for interpretation about like what does it mean? Because what don't they trust you about? Do they not trust you to like, do they think you're gonna cheat on them with a different dom? Do they think you're seeing someone on the side? Like, well, I guess this is like a theoretical scenario actually. So it's not even like an actual person I have to think about. So I guess one, I would say I have not personally seen this issue very often where the dominant doesn't like trust you to be loyal to them unless they are a very naturally suspicious person, in which case that is not a good person. It's not a good personality for BDSM. So I wouldn't say that's like necessarily a common issue, but I do think that building up trust is part of any relationship and part of a kink relationship. So before you go even into the dom sub power exchange thing, you have to have that solid foundation of trust there. And hopefully by the time you get to that stage of being in a power exchange relationship, you will have that baseline trust where they're not like constantly suspicious of all your activity and monitoring you, watching you all the time, checking your text messages, logging into your Facebook account, whatever else it is they could possibly do. So hopefully get to that point first. And I mean, the way that you build up trust there is the same way you build up trust in any other relationship, right? And really getting to know the person and make sure you're compatible first. But luckily, it's a theoretical problem and not a real one. So I would recommend worrying slightly less about that because it is not, I think, a problem that you are quite likely to run into. I think most people I know that are doms in the kink community tend to be like fairly secure people, at least like the good ones, right? They tend to be fairly secure people. They don't get threatened easily. They're not overly suspicious. I do definitely know some people that in like the breakup stage of a relationship suddenly go off the fucking handle and go crazy in terms of hacking into emails and phones and whatever else they can get their hands on. So, you know, people can always end up going a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when things don't go their way, which is why you have to build up that trust first to make sure they aren't a kind of person that would do that. But if anyone does have any input on this one, if you've been in a scenario like this and you had to deal with it, I would love to know your experience. But fortunately, I do not have any any sort of evidence to support that is a realistic concern, which is good. We want less concerns. So that's actually a positive. Cupcakes asked, do you encounter a lot of married couples in the BDSM community? I do, actually. Again, let's go back to stereotypes for a minute here. So I think a lot of people have this stereotype that the BDSM world is all like hot 20-somethings that are unmarried and poly and have like 6 partners and are all really hot and skinny and whatever else. And that is simply not the case. Like the average BDSM couple, if you go to a general BDSM event, a general convention, a class, the people hosting munches, like the average age is usually in the 40s or 50s after kids are out of the house, and usually they're married. Usually, I've also oh my god. It was like I had a single grain of pepper on the back of my throat. Anyways, yeah, I think marriage is like perfectly, like it's like, if I had to guess what happens, there is like a big group of people that are in their 20s generally, and I have another side note tangent to bring up in relation to doing kink in your 20s. But I know a lot of people that are in their 20s that have casual partnerships or multiple partnerships, and they're not married, they don't have kids, and then something happens in people's 30s, and then there's a big gap between is like people in their 20s and then people in their 50s. And so I think people tend to leave being active in BDSM during child rearing years, is what it seems like, if they were active beforehand, and then they get into it again later. Although I don't know how many people that start out doing BDSM in their 20s take a break and then come back. I think sort of the older generation of BDSM, people that are in their 40s and 50s, they didn't get started until they were older. So they didn't have like an earlier time doing BDSM. Like maybe they did some like fetishy stuff in the bedroom. Maybe they, had sort of an unconventional taste in pornography, but they didn't have something to go and participate in. And so they weren't even there. Because, like, when they would have been in their 20s 30 years ago in the early 90s, like, that was, like, the community was, like, so much less accessible unless you lived in, like, San Francisco or New York, basically. So you didn't have anywhere in person you could go to. So I think the older people that are there that are married weren't necessarily involved earlier unless they're, like, real old guard, like, been active since the 70s. My observation. But they still make up the bulk of the community because they tend to have more time. They tend to have the money to travel, to pay for equipment, to pay for conventions, to pay for memberships. They are more secure in their jobs, so they're less likely about losing their careers because of their identity being outed. And they just have, like, a deeper, more trusting connection after, like, being married for 20 plus years. So I think that is kind of the average experience of, like, married 50-year-old people. But on the other end of the spectrum, we do have people that are kind of more in my wheelhouse, which is, like, in their 20s, not married, unconnected, haven't had kids yet. So sort of a divide there. But I think as sort of my current generation of kinksters grows older, I do think we will, one, see people that are staying in the community during child rearing years, because of, like, the advantages of having an alternative relationship structure where there's multiple parents in a household. And I think you will see people that drop off and then come back. And this is sort of, like, I think the first test we've had of that being something where the community is, like, widely accessible to people as opposed to they only discover it later on in life. On the note of people in their 20s doing BDSM, something I did learn from the video that Dr. K did that I didn't know before was that reportedly, I think this was related to no, it wasn't fetishes, it was kink interests. Not necessarily BDSM participation, but people that have, like, kinky interests, for men that discover it, that on average tends to begin younger than age 15. So, like, early puberty and before. For men, tends to be when they first recognize, like, an unconventional, kinky, sexual, usually, interest. But for women, most women don't discover their interest in kink until after puberty, and usually even after full brain development, so, like, after 25. So you have men that discover kind of their kinkiness, like, very early on, and then women that don't necessarily recognize that they're kinky until they're 19, 20, 21, 25, 26. And I think that really tracks because I definitely know a lot of people that are in my age range that are just like, oh yeah, I guess I'm kinky. Like, it wasn't that they were, like, masturbating to kinky porn when they were, like, 13, but they just kind of grew into it as they got out of puberty, which I think is really interesting how that happens, because it's not connected to sexual maturity. Like, it's not connected with, like, how many years since your first period. It's not connected to, like, if you're ovulating or not. Like, I wonder what the component for that is, like in terms of the, like, I don't know, if the neurochemistry of it. Like, why is it that interest doesn't, like, precipitate out until that point of mental maturity? I find that very interesting that it could be so different, at least according to the scientific research. But anyways, food for thought on that one. I think that's quite interesting. What was your thought process for starting the channel? Were you an educator IRL before starting? I have stuff, not BDSM necessarily, to talk about, but I don't know where to start because I feel like a nobody. So I started making videos on YouTube because I was on Instagram, and I was, like, the only person that was actually going to BDSM events, like going to parties, going to meetups. I wasn't an educator. Like, I basically started my channel when I was first getting my feet into doing BDSM myself. Of course, like, I did, like, review videos. I did unboxings of, like, BDSM gear. I was not an educator at first, and I took, like, I did a couple of videos. I did, like, 3 or 4, and then I took, like, a 6-month long break, and then I came back to it. And in that time, I learned a lot. So basically, from the time I had, like, a year of experience and then into, like, today. But I didn't really, like, consider myself an educator until, like, a couple years ago. I just sort of started talking because people had questions, and I was, like, the person that had answers and had the resources, and I was happy to share that with people to make sure that they you know, had education, because a lot of kink information that was available online, especially at the time, was either very outdated, catered to a completely different segment of the population, or was just like inaccurate. So did a lot of combating misinformation, and still do. That's still a key part of the channel. But yeah, I was not educated beforehand. I was actually still in school when I started making videos. Such is life. Not in school anymore though. Good question, Dennis. Dennis asked, is guilt slash shame a common obstacle for beginning dominance, and are there good resources for helping work through that? Really, really good question. So I don't have any concrete numbers for how common it is. I would say that it is something that a lot of people ask me about, which kind of has the implication, therefore, that it is somewhat common, at least. Like, it is something that other people go through. I don't really have any tailored resources I can give you that's like how dominants deal with shame and guilt. It depends on, one, the degree of the shame and the guilt, and two, where the source of it is from. If it's very extreme, if it's very profound, if it's causing a lot of distress, that is when you get an actual like mental health professional involved. But if it's more like mild, kind of like little, what I would call like wibbly feelings, where just like, I kind of feel a little bit bad about doing this, I'm not really sure if this makes me a good person or not, like that's something you, one, like work through with a partner, and two, work through with other like people in your peer group. And I know from my own personal experience, like the number one thing that gave me a lot of confidence, though not as a dom, so that experience is different, but the thing that gave me a lot of confidence in myself was just like seeing other normal, healthy adults doing BDSM and having fun, and especially seeing older people do BDSM and like having fun, and knowing this was something that they had been doing for 20 years and they were still doing it, and they were good people and they loved and respected their partners. Like just seeing those other excuse me, seeing those other experiences and seeing other people be confident in themselves like helped me feel confident in myself. So I think really the best resource is other dominants, like having a local community you can be a part of, a Discord chat, an online munch, a support group. There are support groups, I know, for masters and for doms. You can look on FetLife for online events for things like that, and those are really helpful because while not every dominant experiences shame and guilt as a continual thing, I think a lot of people have at least dealt with a particular time period or an instance where it happened. Like maybe it's a particular type of play, or how a particular relationship went, or the first time you did BDSM. Whatever it is, a lot of people have gone through it to some extent. And so I think it's a very relatable issue, but seeing other people that have worked through it and gone out to the other side and are not afraid to be themselves and are confident. And I think also to hear from submissives as well, because again, this depends on the source of the guilt and the shame, because I think you can be guilty or you can feel shameful because you feel like it makes you a bad person in general to like hit people, or it makes you evil if you want to hurt people. That's like a very abstract thing. But if you're worried about like, I don't want to hit this person because I love them, and if I hit them, therefore that means I can't really love them or something, the way that you work through that is by like talking to the person that you're with that wants to do things with you, and get that very clear reassurance from somebody that you know really well and that you trust, that they also want this, that they really enjoy it, that it doesn't make you a bad person, that you are giving them a fun time, that it's about mutual pleasure, and like always keeping that in mind. But really, like, I think the source of guilt and shame is living outside of our values, or having values that like conflict with what society tells us our values should be. So if you don't have a robust set of values, I would like work on figuring out what that is, and then telling yourself, you know, how my BDSM interests fit into my values. Like if you really value consent, if you only do BDSM with consenting people where it's going to be a mutually fun time, then you know you're living inside your values. And that is a really, really good thing for kind of combating that internal thing that tells you like you're doing this and that makes it something wrong or that makes you a bad person. Having that very direct evidence that like, well, actually I'm living in the way that's important to me and that I feel makes me a good person and I'm not violating those precepts by doing this thing. If it's like a social thing where it's like society tells me that this thing is bad, like just remember that there is a difference between non-consensual torture and punishment versus doing something focused in mutual pleasure. Also, I mentioned this earlier, but looking at the science, looking at the studies and the research about people that are into BDSM, their mental health outcomes, the fact that we're not all crazy people, the fact that, I shouldn't say that. I should say, we're not all people that struggle with mental health issues in terms of like, just because you're a sadist doesn't mean you're like somebody with a clinical sadism disorder. Does that make sense? And I think knowing what the data actually says is good to have. And if you're like a more sciencey focused person, having that information can be really helpful for like combating that internal dialogue. Anyways, that was a really long answer. We have 10 minutes left. So get your questions in now, everyone. Get your questions in now. Final opportunity in the next 10 minutes, unless I ramble, in which case it may be slightly more. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, but guilt and shame is really hard. Oh, also, I believe it's Brene Brown has really good TED Talks on YouTube talking about guilt and shame. So if you haven't seen those yet, they are genuinely very helpful and I think do a really good job. Not for kink necessarily, but for all things involving guilt and shame and like talking about the purpose they serve. And you don't have to hang on to feelings that aren't like helping you, and that's one of the things that she talks about. Anyways, I have so many other questions that need to get asked. Okay, we have one from Mr. Beansman on a similar subject. Do you have any advice for dealing with fear and anxiety of something going wrong when you top for the first time? Oh my goodness. So what I would do is I would listen to yourself and I would say, okay, what is it about this that I am anxious? Because like something going wrong can mean a lot of things. Does that mean you are afraid of accidentally hurting someone? Does that mean that you are afraid of not making the other person happy? Does it mean that you're afraid, or I guess anxious about? Are you anxious about the other person not enjoying themselves? Are you anxious about not performing? Are you anxious about getting embarrassed in front of other people that realize you're not experienced? And then think about what you can do to mitigate the source of that anxiety. For example, if you are afraid of hurting someone, you can make sure that you have done a lot of practice. You can refresh yourself on any classes you've taken about the thing you want to do. Brush up on your online resources. Make sure you have good conversations with your partner about your experience level and your mutual risk profile. And kind of go through the checklist of things you can do to mitigate that fear of, I could mess up and like hurt someone, if that's the thing you're dealing with. And then when you get into the moment, I think it's a lot easier to run through that checklist and look and go, okay, I'm afraid of this thing happening, but based on what I'm afraid of this thing happening, how likely is it to actually happen? And two, look at the things I have done to mitigate that happening, even if it is like relatively low risk, right? And then hold on to that and know if you've done everything you can to mitigate that, then it's not something you really need to worry about, and worrying about it too much is going to ruin your experience. And I find that technique to be really helpful, like having that mental checklist and reassurance of like, okay, like I'm worried about this thing, but like how likely is it? What have I done to make sure it's not going to happen? And yeah, that's sort of a simplified version of the process, but that is what I find personally helpful. If it's something like I'm worried that they're not going to have a fun time and I'm worried that I'm going to embarrass myself, then I think it's a good opportunity to lean into the connection you have with the bottom that you're playing with, and make sure you set up a scene where you're playing inside your skill sets. You're maybe not, I do advocate for public play, but maybe don't have it be like a performance scenario. Like, maybe kind of play in the back where it's a little bit more quiet. Uh, make sure your partner understands that this is like your first time topping and you're kind of nervous about it. Like, I think having open and honest communication, um, and kind of enlisting your bottom partner to help you with that can actually do a lot to mitigate that anxiety, and just like building in check-ins to a scene as well. Like when you are actually there in the moment and doing the thing, like I don't know what kind of dynamic you're going for in the scene, but check-ins are great, and check-ins are not just for bottoms; they are also for tops, because you can say, hi, hey, how you doing? Did you like that? Like, oh god, I don't know how to like talk sexy, but you know what I mean, right? Like, you can be flirty with it when you are asking someone how they're doing and how they're enjoying something. Like, yeah, you like it when I do fill in the blank, and then they can give you feedback, and hopefully hearing that positive feedback of them saying that they're into it and they like it and they're doing good will help you feel more confident in the moment if you feel like your feelings are wavering. But also just like give yourself the grace to know that it is, everyone has to have their first time doing something, and it's not always going to go well or go perfectly, and that's part of what makes it being the first time you do something a novel and fun experience, is the sort of quaintness of not being perfect at it, like just understand that it's your first time doing something. You're gonna have fun. Screwing up is part of the process. It's totally natural. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be a dom or whatever, and just like approach it with uh, a desire to have fun and curiosity, and not setting your own expectations for yourself too high. Da, 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 da. Sorry, I just read a funny comment. I'm not gonna read it out loud though. Can brats deal with social anxiety to the point that they stop bratting out because they don't want to actually annoy or upset their dom? Makes me feel less like a brat for having this mental hurdle, especially since I've always been naturally bratty, and it's stopping me from doing what I love doing. It miss the fun of what I can get out of it, and it makes me feel less of a brat. Oh, totally, totally. If you're dealing with social anxiety, I don't think it makes you not a brat. I'm not a brat, so I can't say if this experience is typical of brats, but I think it is typical of people. I think getting and developing social anxiety can absolutely get in the way of things, even things that are like natural and normal for you to do that you did previously that you didn't have roadblocks around. Mm, have you tried Cuban or South American food? Sorry, I'm trying to like. There's like a big conversation going on, and I realize I'm not reading questions. Yeah, I have. I really like Peruvian food. There was a really good Peruvian place when I went to college. It was good. I lived in Florida for a while. I don't distinctly remember seeking out Cuban food, but I'm sure I've had Cuban food. Yeah, I do think that tops and doms should be comfortable engaging in kink. Well, okay. I think that in general, it is okay for tops and doms to want to engage in kink without sex, but I don't think every dom has to. Like, I think if you're a dom and the thing you get out of it is always going to be sexual to some degree, and I know people like that, that is perfectly okay and valid as well. It is just a different approach. And it's about finding people that have a similar approach. That way you're not disappointed at the end of the day. I know this is a different topic, but can we normalize validating your dom's technique? If you genuinely like it, of course. It recently happened to me for the first time. I was speechless. Yeah, I think positive reinforcement for doms and complimenting people and letting them know they're doing good. We should do more of it. It's not just submissives that need reassurance, for sure. Yeah. So going back, I think I want to end on as a vegan Cuban in Florida. I have a deep desire to make you a plate. Now, listen, if anyone, like, I don't think you can mail it, but I would love some vegan Cuban food. The vegan food up here is like pretty, it's burgers, fries, breakfast food. Like, there's not a lot of like regional vegan food. There's vegan Thai, vegan Nepalese, a lot of vegan Asian stuff, but not a lot of like vegan South American, like African. I guess there's Ethiopian, which is sort of like, I've heard people say it's naturally vegan, which I don't know if that's true or not, but it does have a lot of vegan ingredients. But I haven't been to an Ethiopian restaurant yet. That's on my list. Okay, yeah, I think I want to end this one on going back to the aromantic topic because I did see we got some feedback and more questions, so I want to make sure we get to those. So, I've been accused of being aro in the past, and it's not entirely wrong. For me, relationships were more about happiness and pleasure than they were gestures of love and romance. It was a lot more logic and cognitive, mind oriented, with mutual happiness as the overall goal, and a lot less I do this because of love or I did this because I saw it in a movie and it feels romantic. And then Barney followed up with, I often find sexual relationships are pointless. Like, both require trust, and I genuinely enjoy being with someone I love on a soul level. Sex takes time and a place, which is often expensive. Oh, jeez. Okay, I know there was other stuff related. I think it's at the bottom. Sorry, I'm like skipping around now, but I reserve the right to skip around in my chat. Yes, I am aromantic, but not asexual. Yeah, I am not aromantic. Yeah, people can be aromantic and people can be one or the other. They can be both. They can be one or the other. Totally depends on the individual. I don't know how being aromantic would affect you being in BDSM because that's not my experience, but I am sure it would affect it in some way if you are trying to get into like long-term committed BDSM relationships in particular, because those do tend to be the most likely to have romantic connections to them. But I think a BDSM space is actually a really good space to have physical intimacy and find people that want physical intimacy without necessarily bringing in romance. So I actually think the BDSM world is a really, really, I don't know if easy is the right word, but it's certainly a place where you can be more open about your aromanticism and have that more likely to be respected, I think, in some ways. Just because we understand that there are many alternatives for expressing affection for someone or care for them without it necessarily being sexual or romantic, or the way that we express our attractions in those areas maybe being more unconventional. What is the difference between romantic attraction and sexual attraction? I By the way, if you want to make sure I answer your question, use a super chat because otherwise I cannot guarantee that I will see it. So, super chat or Streamlabs, either one. Links below. You can check them out, or the little dollar button in the chat. Otherwise, I cannot promise I will answer a question because there are too many, which is great. But Can't get to all of them. What is the difference between romantic attraction and sexual attraction? Good news, Matthew. I have a whole video that I made talking about the 5 different types of attraction. Long answer short, there is some overlap between them. Sexual attraction is about a desire to engage in sex with a particular person. Romance or romantic attraction is about wanting to pursue romantic things with a person. And what constitutes being romantic varies person to person, but if you experience romantic attraction, you will have some kind of internal sense about what that is. And that video goes into examples and differences and comparisons, which I won't repeat here for the sake of brevity, but there is an answer in that video. And if it still doesn't make sense to you, then either you experience romantic and sexual attraction as a combined thing, or you don't experience one or the other. Generally. I can only explain things in ways that make sense to my own head, and if my explanation doesn't resonate with you or it's not being clear, then definitely feel free to seek out other answers that maybe make more sense with your own individual brain. On that note, though, we did get an answer. Someone says that romantic is about love and emotional security. Sex is about the physical pleasure, but they are not necessarily different. They do overlap for some people. Yeah, exactly. Definitely, like a lot of people, I think, in heterosexual culture. Oh no, the heterosexuals. No, we love the heteros. They're great. I think the standard default is to have them be overlapped. And so it may not make sense to have them be separated. Although I think sometimes they do, because people talk about like emotionless sex or unattached sex. And that attachment, that emotion is generally romantic when they are intertwined. How do you feel about the OG versus TNG debate? Do you think the lifestyle will come back to its traditions? I don't know is there a debate happening? If so, I don't know where it is. I don't know. Is that on Twitter? I mean, it feels like it's always been kind of somewhere in the mix. People being like, back in my day, which is the same for any community. World of Warcraft, Magic the Gathering, Ren Fairs, BDSM, everyone loves their traditions and likes going back to them. Chiming in to say that queer platonic relationships are great. They are. We love queer platonic relationships. They are amazing. Or quasi-platonic. I find that if you're not like, I like this phrase I've learned recently, a member of the alphabet mafia. If you're not part of the alphabet mafia, I think using the word queer platonic can be misinterpreted. I like using the term quasi-platonic to explain it to the outside world, because I think the word quasi as a modifier helps get to the point that it's like a platonic relationship-ish. Like it's platonic, but not in the way that the average person in society would consider to be platonic, right? It's like, it's platonic, but it's like different than what you think it is. We love the hetero so much. Some of us have parents who are hetero. Exactly. I mean, they can't help it, right? They can't help it. Okay, it is 7 after. I need to wrap up here. I'm just going to read out this kind of like last thought in regards to aromanticism, which is, as an aromantic, it's definitely harder to find partners, but it just comes down to communicating expectations. As it always does for all of us, communication, y'all, is key. And let us have that as our final thought for today. Communication is key. Welcome. Welcome to the standard thing that I say all the time, like a million times a video: communication, communication, communication. It's like location, 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 but if you're not selling real estate, basically. That's the vibe. Okay, all right. Well, that's going to be it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for being here. This is a lot of fun. Again, we do stream every Friday at 6 p.m. on the West Coast, which is 9 p.m. on the East Coast. I actually listed all of the time zones, like the key ones. I think it's 2 a.m. in London. what is it? It's like, anyways, I have the time zones for like the key areas down below. If you're like from somewhere that's not America and you're like, what time is that for me in my time zone? Now you know. Or you could just look at the clock if you're here live. That might also help too. If you don't know what time it is, pro tip. But anyways, I'm going to go for now, guys. Stay safe, have fun, and I will talk to you again soon.